Welcome, everyone. Welcome. It's a rainy day in Portland and it's quite chilly. I also have the window open because it's a kitten viewing spot right there for the birds outside the window. So I am bundled up. I hope that you are also warm and comfortable enough. We're going to be talking this afternoon about what it's like to be parenting upstream and downstream. And that means that you're called the sandwich generation. It's one of the big things that we work with in Hunger, Hope, and Healing on a regular basis. And that's because women who come to us may be parenting their parents. They may have been parentified very young in their life to be enmeshed with or even merged with their parents and their parents' needs. Often it's particularly happening with their mom. That's what we've been hearing a lot more about in recent months and years in Hunger, Hope, and Healing. And at the same time, they may be parenting their own children, and sometimes parenting their children who are adult children, and then also taking care of their grandchildren. So that means you're like the extra sandwich generation. You have more than one generation that you're sandwiched into there. So let's start with a short practice together to get kind of grounded and centered, to know where we are, because this time is for you to be connected with you. And I know that it can be really difficult when you sense that your world has gotten organized around you meeting the needs of everyone else. It can be hard to know where to settle in to meet your own needs. So let's imagine that we're kind of coming down through a funnel, as if you were using a funnel in the kitchen, you're pouring something into it. We're going to come down through this funnel into ourselves. Okay, so please take a comfortable seat. It's good to have you here. Thank you for joining me. Take this comfortable seat and rest into yourself. Allow your attention and your awareness to filter out that which is not relevant to the present moment, and to filter in that which is relevant to the present moment. So, for example, filtering out your email list or your shopping list. Filtering out the conversation from yesterday or the event that's coming tomorrow. And then start noticing the actual kind of data, I like to call it, the data of the present moment, like the sound of birds or traffic. The temperature of the air on the skin of your body. I'm noticing that on my hands and my face, because again, the window behind me is open. And then as you're coming down through this funnel of attention, start noticing your physical body right here in the present. Let your shoulders drop down away from your ears. Lengthen up through your spine. Give a little lift at the base of your skull. And very gently tip your chin down towards your throat. So you start having this internal gaze. You're gazing towards your own heart. And then let your attention travel from the head and down through the funnel into your body. So start noticing your breath coming and going. Gentle inhale, gentle exhale. And of course, as you're doing this, it's quite likely that you start having these little pings of things that are on your to-do list. These little miniature intrusions, or like a little bit like mosquito bites. They're coming and you don't have control over when they arrive. And yet, we can have this leadership over our attention. So notice the breath again, coming and going, and coming and going. And then start to sense deeper than the breath. You have these internal needs. These are real and valid needs, like needs for rest, needs for affirmation, needs for connection, a need for novelty or spontaneity. But let's start with the needs really close to the basic needs of the physical body. So a need for rest, a need for nourishment, hydration, needs for assurance, connection, acknowledgement, a need for relief, needs for collaboration, mutuality. And just try to sense where those needs actually live in your body, like as I say them. So I'm going to review those. The first few are related to your physiological, even metabolic well-being. The next are related to our need for safety and connection. And then we have our needs for how we get to work in connection so that it enthuses our life, not just that we have assurance, but we also get collaboration and mutuality. So listen into your body again for where you can sense the needs, like on the radar screen, the need for rest, the need for nourishment, the need for hydration, the need for movement or healthy exercise, a need for connection, a need for assurance, what would it be like to feel a sense of assurance in your daily life, to have that need met? A need for acknowledgement. What would it be like if you were consistently and regularly, sincerely acknowledged? And a need for collaboration. You're working together, you're cooperating. Systems are collaborating. Where do you sense your need for mutuality in your body? What comes alive when you hear the words mutuality and collaboration? And then a need for relief. Like, you can be spelled by somebody, they can take over for a while. A need for relief. And as you sense those things in your body, just now come back to the breath. And when you sense the breath, let that be a connection between your inner world and our sense of being here together. The breath also connects you to the space you're sitting in. And then what you can do is raise your hands to your heart. And you're welcome to bow your head to your heart. Thank you for sharing the meditation with me, taking the time for that. Let me put my, what are these called? Earpods or AirPods? Let me put these things in just a moment. What are these called? I don't remember. I want to say iPod because it was the first pod that I heard the name of, but I don't think it's called that. Let me check that these are. Okay, terrific, great. Okay, so how this topic came about for Mother's Day weekend is that we do have a lot of women in Hunger, Hope, and Healing, those of you here included, who have been working with, struggling with, navigating, being in the sandwich generation. Okay, that doesn't mean that you're eating sandwiches. It doesn't mean that we're in that generation where a sandwich was 2 pieces of bread and 1 piece of cheese and some mayonnaise. It has nothing to do with the actual food thing called a sandwich. It means you're sandwiched between the parenting that you're doing upstream and the parenting that you're doing downstream. And sometimes what it is, as I said before when we were beginning, it's not just that you're parenting downstream, like your adult children might need some things from you. You might be also grandparenting because your adult children need you to grandparent for them so that they can have their job or their schooling and so on. So you might be a daughter, a mother, and a grandmother. And it can really seem confusing, like, where do you put yourself on the schedule? Where do your needs get met? How do you include yourself in all of that? Well, let's just consider a couple things first, because before you were parenting downstream, you were receiving parenting from upstream. And it turns out that research shows that how we received that parenting from upstream to us was very formative. It shaped us in specific ways. Research also shows that to the extent that our parents, and particularly in the eating disorder world, what I see is that to the extent that our parents, and specifically our moms, have allowed for us to differentiate, to be our own person, to the extent that we've been acknowledged for our individuation, our unique sovereign self. Now, that doesn't come with infancy or toddlerhood, it's coming as you're developing, right? So to the extent that that is encouraged along the way, we end up being a healthier human being who knows how to collaborate, respect, offer mutuality. We can give a spell, we can take some responsibility, we can say no without feeling like it's going to be the end of a relationship. So this key thing on differentiation and individuation is really essential. And it doesn't mean just that we're kind of respectful to others and we're nice to them and they're nice to us. This differentiation really means that we feel our inner self is permitted. You get to be your intact whole self, and so does the other person. And there isn't a sense that the obligations, this feeling of like a duty that goes beyond the norm, that level of obligation or burden, you don't have a sense that that's coming down to you, and that your relationship with the person who is sending it downstream to you, that this is contingent upon your love and acceptance. You don't have a sense that it's conditional, like if you behave in this way, you'll have love and acceptance and support. With differentiation, two people get to be whole human beings in themselves, and then they have a relationship that includes sometimes conflict, sometimes compassion, frequently connection, the ability to withstand disruption in a relationship, and the desire to go deeply into mutuality, reciprocity, and again, collaboration. So that's two individuated people having a connection. When we come into adulthood, and in our early adulthood, we're still the daughter in the family. But in our early adulthood, we also have permission to become our unique sovereign self. We're finding out who that is. And yet we can still rely on some of the tethers or supports that we get from our parents. But as we come into another level of our adulthood, we want to be able to have a relationship between the parent and the child who's now an adult that moves more and more towards this individuated, collaborative, respectful relationship. There is mutuality going in both directions. There is respect in both directions. Rather than feeling burdened by what's coming downstream, we feel honored. We can even sense when our parents are then aging, and that's when they need us to be parenting them, particularly if they're having a medical situation, we can sense that we're honored to be there for them. We're honored that we can allow for their vulnerability or their fragility or their needs, or in my case, my mother is quite spunky. So if you're going to take care of her when she's had a medical event, you've got to be ready for the spunkiness and some resistance that she has to even having relationship. It's not a spoken explicit resistance. So you have to be able to sense that, and you kind of respond to what her limitations are, but it doesn't limit you, nor myself, nor my sister in this case. So depending on the phase of life for our parent that we're parenting, if they're in that elder phase where we're really caring for them in the most vulnerable part of their lives, if we've been able to be a part of a family system where there is collaboration, mutuality, respect, there's interdependence and interconnection, people recognize that everyone has a role to play, that feels like
the village take care of the elder, like a village raises a child. But if what's happened is our parent is in this later stage of life and we are kind of nominated, or we've nominated ourselves, or we feel obligated to be the one who's taking care of them, and yet there's a lot of contentiousness or unspoken conflict or dysregulation in the family system, it can feel more like a burden, like we're all just trying to navigate this, and maybe walking on eggshells is a term that you've heard before, or trying to anticipate but never quite getting it right. You can never quite satisfy the parent. The parent is uneasy. They don't quite know what's going on. They may not have their own deepest mental well-being. And so there's a dance that starts getting organized around that. And that dance is picking up the filters of the past. The past impressions are showing up there. And often that will happen even if we've had a lot of personal development in our adult life. So one thing we say in Hunger, Hope, and Healing, it's so helpful to have a mindfulness and yoga practice, because each time that you're kind of exposed to that dynamic in the parenting upstream, for each exposure, you also have a yoga practice, a mindfulness practice. You kind of come back to yourself again and again. So you are centered in who you are. You can remember that the past is showing up in the now, that this is your parent and they're in a fragile phase of life, and that you can still set clear boundaries. You can still make choices. You still have to honor your well-being, particularly if you're also parenting others downstream. You know, you have responsibilities in both directions. So how will you moderate how much to give upstream, and how to organize an appropriate care providing team, whether that includes your siblings or medical health professionals, whatever you're going to bring together for that team. You also likely need respite care if you're caring for someone who's in their later phase of life. And let's say you're doing that at a distance, you have to drive to get there, you drive back home, or it's really close and you're always there. You're going to need some respite care to support yourself. To what extent do you feel like you deserve that respite care? That is something permitted for you to have. And what role would food be playing? How is food used during this particular relational event to soothe or to numb or to sedate or to keep going? How is food used to push on, right? What's happening with food in this case, and with your sleep and your self-care and your emotional well-being? If there wasn't individuation or differentiation along the way, it's likely that those things all feel really complicated, and not because you're not intelligent. Not that at all. There is nothing inherently fundamentally wrong with you. What can happen is we tell ourselves that, how come I can't manage this? And these seem like basic things, like feeding myself and resting and having appropriate exercise seems so basic. It's not that basic when in our neurological map, there are these kind of hiccups or hijacks where we didn't get the mutuality and the reciprocity to differentiate. And now we're working with someone whose life stage is on the far end. It's, you know, they're arcing out. Sorry if I'm stunning you with my reference to that. And all kinds of feelings are going to be coming, all kinds of emotions. Some of them we won't have a neurological map for. We turned off the faucets for those emotions with this person maybe a long time ago. And yet emotions start coming in. We may not recognize them. We may go back to pushing those emotions down or sideways with food. So all kinds of things can happen there with the relationship and with the emotions, both those that we feel and those that we don't feel. And we can end up turning to food. I'm not recommending that, but it does happen. I'm not recommending that you don't have food for, you know, nourishment and sometimes for soothing, but I'm not recommending that you overindulge in that way, that it sends you down the rabbit hole of shame and self-hatred. And it gives shame another chance to tell you that in fact you are messed up, that you are doing this wrong. It gives another voice in your repertoire of voices that's going to criticize you. So the feeling that you're not doing something well enough, good enough, and so on, and caring for your parent, the feeling that you never can give enough, it's never received fully by them, the feeling that it's going to exhaust you, but you have to keep pushing. Now you've got this lessened buoyancy, a decrease of resilience, and here's the voice coming over your head. And if you go for the food, that voice gets louder. So let's say that those are some of the things. We have a few people in Hunger, Hope, and Healing right now who are parenting downstream and upstream. And in some cases, it's their direct parent that they're caring for. In some cases, it's an in-law. And what has happened in these family systems is that the siblings or the siblings-in-law, the what do you can you call them that? Sisters-in-law, brothers-in-law, like that, yeah. The way the family system got organized, one of our Hunger, Hope, and Healing group members or another or several, they kind of got nominated by the system to be the one who's managing, because we happen to have high competency. A lot of women in Hunger, Hope, and Healing are very competent, very capable, and willing to push through or to, you know, help things to happen. We're willing to go the distance because we've, in some ways, we've sacrificed ourselves enough, we're practiced at it enough. The system then nominates without even explicitly ever saying anything. Sometimes that system is nominating us because it's leaning back, right? It's leaning way back and like, you know, there's a chore to be done or a call to be made and you're looking around and like, there's nobody there. We sometimes say crickets, right? No one is there. It's going to be you. And so those are moments where if we reach for food to navigate that kind of circumstance, we will be putting food into our mouths, which means we will not be speaking out of our mouths what we might need to say. We may not be communicating because it would be a risk to communicate to these siblings or siblings-in-law. Might be a risk to communicate to family members that actually we have boundaries and the team needs to come together here. Now the risk is discord. The risk is that people become disappointed in you. The risk is they feel upset that you're changing the dynamic. The risk is all those things which are related to their limitations. While you're setting a clear boundary, you're raising your clarity. You're increasing your access to your own intelligence. But it's going to highlight the limitations of the others. And that can feel painful to have that highlighted, particularly if they have not been developing any way to navigate those limitations. And you're going to see the, not even a feigned sense of incompetence, but that they're not competent in certain areas. They may not be compassionate. They may not be kind as they pick up the task that you're letting them take over or asking them to take over. They may not do it in a kind or compassionate way. And that can sting you also because you'll be like, why are you doing it that way? I do it kindly or compassionately. Where has your warmth gone? Where has your consideration gone? That's our parent or that's your parent, whoever you're speaking about. And you might assume that they're doing it that way on purpose to cause you to pick it back up again. Like, if you're going to do it like that, I'll just do it myself. You might say something in this way. But actually, it's possible that they aren't practiced and that they have their own repository of suppressed, repressed emotions. They may not ever have expressed anything like that to you, so you can't see it on them. But if they have been withdrawing from responsibility, if they have been unwilling to participate, if they've been that reluctant, that's one way that they're trying to differentiate in a system that has not allowed for differentiation. Refusal is an act of differentiation. So is moving 3,000 miles away or to the next state. You know, those are ways that people differentiate when they don't know how to do it in the relationship. They do it physically or, you know, mentally. So you might have siblings or siblings-in-law who have suppressed or repressed certain things, and you ask them to pick up a job or a task or to collaborate here, and they could do it less kindly or less compassionately. And you might think, oh my God, I got to take that back. I should do that again. It's up to me now. Or they might feel paralyzed by the request. And that could be tapping into an early memory in their own body that they have no knowledge of. I'm not saying that they're in therapy or that they're doing this kind of research, but they could become sort of paralyzed or touch something in them that makes them feel like inadequate, and their resistance might go up at first. That is okay. You can tolerate that. You can bear that. They're going to have to go through a developmental arc. They might need support. They might need coaching. Maybe they could find a coach that helps them with caring for an aging parent. They might need therapy. which is more specific than coaching, but some people don't want to hear that they need therapy. They prefer to hear they need a coach to help them with something in this area. Because coaches often work on a targeted topic for a shorter period of time, it can be really effective. And therapy is often a longer term commitment, including more internal research of what your root tendrils, your psychological root tendrils have been. So when you start setting clear boundaries for this part of your life, parenting upstream, you may have some disruptions surrounding you. Right? And you're going to have to be able to tolerate that. That is why group support, yoga, mindfulness, proper exercise, proper rest, it's going to make that all easier to be navigating. So let's say that how you were parented has been formative, and whatever you've done with that has also been formative. Like if you've been in Hunger, Hope, and Healing, some of you who are here are group members right now. So I've been watching your journey. So fabulous to watch the growth that you guys go through. It's really, really inspiring. And so you had this formative impression soup, this matrix, but then you also joined Hunger, Hope, and Healing. And you started putting things into place, into action. And we can see that the arc of your life has been changing as a result of that. And so what I'm saying about parenting upstream may be things that you have just learned in the last couple of months or the last year or so. For some of you, you're not yet in the program, and so you haven't perhaps put that into traction just yet. But let's turn our attention not just to the upstream now, but to the downstream. When you've been formed by how you received your parenting, and now you're parenting and you're having a formation impact on others, on your kiddos. And sometimes when you were a kid, did you think things like, I can see you guys are smiling. Did you think things like, I'll never parent like that? I'm not going to be like them. Did you think thoughts like, I'll never do it that way? I would never talk to my child that way. And then somehow at some moment, you are low on resources, you're overwhelmed, and somebody in that child group, your children, they do something that touches a nerve, a neurological pathway, and you're like, oh God, I'm parenting just like them. It's coming through. Oh my God, I thought I was going to filter that out. I thought that wasn't going to happen. Okay, so in those moments when you see something like that coming through you, it's a chance to practice the healing, the yoga, to say, okay, yeah, that did happen to me. I was parented with anger or rage or criticism or condemnation, with pressure. I was parented contingently and conditionally. I was parented unilaterally. I didn't have a voice. I was parented with criticism or fear, anxiety, and apprehension about myself. I was parented with these things about my body or my intelligence or my success in life. Oh, that actually happened. And I know it because I can see it coming out of me in this flash when I'm under resourced, overwhelmed. And there it is. Somebody catalyzes that in the children group, as I was saying. It is a moment to pause and breathe and be like, okay, I did that thing. That's called a rupture when you end up doing something that actually causes harm to a child or, your offspring or somebody that you're parenting. If you have stepkids, for example, as I did, that's called a rupture. Of course, we don't want to have ruptures. Of course, we don't want to end up in conflict with our kids. We want to love them and support them and nourish them. And yet, if a rupture comes, it's a sign that we have been overextended and we have the chance to create a repair. And that is very pivotal. For example, how many times did you experience as a child being the recipient of the rupture? And where was the repair? How was that navigated? If you think back on it, and I know some of you are smiling right now, there were ruptures and there were not repairs. In fact, there was a rupture, but you were blamed for the rupture. Therefore, you didn't deserve to have a repair because somehow you should be punished for having this capacity to rupture the relationship, which you were a child. You're supposed to be undeveloped. You're not completely ready. You're not an adult. You're supposed to have some mishaps and some learning curves, and your brain is going through so much development. So when you as the parent experience a rupture in the parenting relationship, you get to move to repair. This strengthens the relationship and makes you more trustworthy to your children. They find you more believable, more approachable, more human. more dimensional. You're not one-dimensional to them. You are dimensional. You're multidimensional. Now, of course, we don't go about causing ruptures to just so we can have repairs. That's a kind of mental health challenge of a certain kind. We won't talk about that now. It's for a different time. We don't just cause ruptures to make repairs and make ourselves, enmeshed and codependent with our children. But that might have happened to some of you here. In fact, because I know who you are, many of you. Yes, it did happen that way. That a couple of you had moms who would rupture the relationship regularly and then seek this sort of pseudo repair with some apology about things, or seek out a repair from you as if you were the parent and they were hurting so much that this had happened. And it got crazy in that regard. It got really misconstrued. So in parenting, the other thing that can happen when you see yourself having that moment of like, oh my God, I'm doing the parenting that I received that I said I wouldn't be doing. One is you've got the rupture, you know that you're under-resourced, you're not resilient right there, you're overwhelmed. But a second thing is, as that's happening, you can see yourself and remember the young version of you and what it was like for her to receive that coming her way. And let your body help you with the memory of that, because it's possible that you've had to store it down, particularly if you haven't been in Hunger, Hope, and Healing yet in our group. You may have stored it and you're not quite aware of it. Many of our group members are working on just this kind of thing where you feel that alive in your body and you tend to it. It's kind of like reparenting yourself right there. You hold that close, like, what was it like to be a child of a certain, size and age, receiving that kind of rupture from a parent who seemed like all powerful and much bigger and more capable of overwhelming us? What was it like to receive that? Can you care for yourself in that moment right there? How you experience that as a child, because it's coming alive in your body for a moment. So I recommend that we kind of tap into it, we capture it to give it some compassion and kindness, right? A third thing that can happen when you're parenting like that and you see it going on is you start recognizing that this might be some of the stuff that moved you to food, that moved you to eat, so that this kind of stuff wouldn't happen. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're overwhelmed, overextended, blah, blah, and you are really frustrated with your child. You're in the kitchen making the dinner, they're complaining in the other room, something is going on. You feel like doing something like raising your voice or getting more specific, or you feel like telling them, in sort of black and white terms, and you kind of sense that wouldn't be so great, but you're already disconnecting because it's so difficult emotionally in that moment and physiologically, and you just reach for the food and start eating, and it feels like you deserve it somehow because this child is complaining in the other room, so therefore you deserve to eat these cookies. And it does seem like it gets connected somewhere in the brain in this case. I know it doesn't make logical sense as I talk about it here, but some of you have had this direct experience. The brownies are there for that reason, right? And so you start having a glimpse. As an adult, you're reaching for food in that moment. When did you reach for food as a child? What did that look like, right? You can start asking yourself that question too. So you can move to repair, you can move to internal repair, and you can move to reflection of like, what was I doing with food in those moments? And if I reach for the food, I'm probably trying to moderate my behavior in some way so I don't say something more to my child or my offspring. Is this really the most helpful way to do this? Is this going to actually be beneficial to me? Am I going to have regret later? Am I repeating a cycle that I don't know how to get out of? So some questions for your reflection there. Now, let's say that you are parenting upstream and you're parenting downstream, but you're also grandparenting and your adult children. Perhaps you've not been able to make a kind of differentiation with them because you didn't receive it from upstream. So that which wasn't modeled may not have been natural for you to express. You might be working on that in Hunger, Hope, and Healing. I know many of you are. But let's say that you're the mom that your kiddos know they can ask you and you're going to be the grandma. Even if you thought at this place in your life, this was going to be your season to go back to school, as some of you were trying to do, So then you're going back to school, getting a part-time job, and you're a grandparent. You're the grandma, and you're parenting your elder parent too. That's kind of a lot to have on your plate. Perhaps the desire to go back to school was there, and you had this on your game plan, and it helped you to have some stamina for the rough times you were experiencing in parenting in both directions. So I'm going to go back to school, and I'm going to, get something for myself. I'm going to express something in my life for myself. I'm going to get a new career, or I'm going to get a part-time job, or I've been in this full-time job. I'm going to shift it up. Maybe that was on your horizon, and it gave you some stamina, some fortitude to keep going in difficult circumstances. And yet now here's a grandbaby or two grandbabies, maybe more than that. And you are the natural person for them to be asking. And it's so fun also to have a grandchild. It can be very fun, as we hear from some of you that have this situation. And yet there you are. The reflex, of course, is in us to care up and down again. The reflex is there to care for these human beings, of course. And yet, what is happening to your well-being? How vital do you feel? How will you be nourished before you are nourishing others? Right? And in some cases, we start having like an equation of sorts, like if I do this much yoga or this much self-care, if I do this much goodness for myself, then I'll be able to grandparent and parent and parent and go to school. So I have to do all of this to make sure I can do this stuff over here. Does that feel balanced? Does it feel breakable? Does it remind you any bit of diet culture? So long as I follow this regime, I'm going to be able to, eat whatever I want and lose all the weight that I want, for example. So I'm not saying that we can't do all of those things. The question is, if we haven't been able to have differentiation that gives us full permission to be a human being who has clear boundaries and vitality and compassion and consideration, we reach our threshold and we can say no, we can set back, we can restore. If we haven't had that internal scaffold developed, then doing all those things is going to be picking up on all this past gunk that's still in there. And it's going to be wearing us down inside quickly because the past stuff is running through the present moment circumstance. It's like compounding it. Right? So this is why healing, the internal healing and the inner scaffold that we develop in Hunger, Hope, and Healing is so important. Right? Thank you for nodding. Yes. Yeah, I've seen your growth. Yeah. Yeah. Those of you who are here, who are in the program, you're in phase 2. So we're really doing that deep dive by that time. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, phase 1 is really about getting that body dashboard and all your self-care. It's creating the scaffold. And as we run that scaffold into formation and we put it into our lives, sometimes we also, and some of you have run into this, we start realizing actually how painful things are. We didn't even know it was that painful because we had adapted to it. We had adapted to it. And so as you come into those awarenesses, it's so helpful to have a group, right? Yes, thank you again for smiling. It's so helpful to have a group of women who are like, yeah, I'm getting that. I'm getting that. I so relate to that. Oh my God. And this is so painful. I didn't know I felt this way. Oh, we're holding you with tenderness and compassion. We're here with you, right? So all of this is going on inside. When we have a scaffold like Hunger, Hope, and Healing, it helps us to learn how have things been? How did they get formed? What can we do differently? And from where can we make those decisions? And that piece about from where do we make the decisions, it really can't come from wisdom if we're still mired in food and dysregulation. If we're still kind of compromising ourselves in all these different ways, and then hoping that we can be the best version of who we're meant to be, from the compromised self, we cannot make the best decisions. It makes sense as I say it now. I know. Again, I can see you smiling. But in the moment when it's happening and we think, okay, I'm going to compromise myself again, I'm just going to dig deep into my reserves and keep going. We are not in our wisdom there. Right. So acknowledging that, yes, thank you for your chats. I'll answer a couple of questions now. And I know some of you have been in the program. So I just was giving, what do you call, like, it is called a compilation or no, it's more than that. It's an art project where you put pieces of magazine clippings together, a collage. I was using a collage of some of your experiences and some other women from Hunger, Hope, and Healing, and some from my Kripalu days, and some pre-pandemic students who were in person at my studio. That was a collage of sorts of different women who've been in the program. So I've got a couple questions here in the chat, and I want to answer those. Oh yeah, okay. So one question, this comes up frequently. What if the way that you want to eat for your health and well-being is not the way the upstream or downstream people want to eat? You eat to nourish yourself. Nobody else can digest your food for you. Nobody can chew that food and swallow it for you. You're not a bird. You're not a baby bird. You eat for what nourishes you. And we want to make the extra effort to do that, because you are a central role in these family systems. It's tempting to make the food that they want or that they want, and then just to eat that because it's going to fill up the stomach and the caloric need for metabolic ongoingness. But if you keep doing that, eating what they want or what they want, your resentment, regret, the disappointment could go deeper. So it just got darker and darker out here. Sorry about the light there. Oh, we're having a storm come in. Yeah. So you can still see me. It looks like old TV, I think, now, but it is what it is. But you eat the food that is yours to eat in that case. Bring it with you, make the ingredients, even make it, and perhaps what they're having is a small portion. If they're a child, they can learn to be more adventuresome with food. In fact, my stepsons, they ate all kinds of international food because that's how I cooked. So Indian food, Thai food, Mexican food, they all ate all different flavors than when they had first come here. They didn't have that wide of a palate. So sometimes they were experimenting, and then they really came to love it. We made a lot of food together. That's the other thing that you can do, is teach your kids, your youngers, I mean, maybe the uppers too, but teach your kids how to be in the kitchen with you, how to find that to be more fun and interesting. Like if you've never made rice paper rolls, it's pretty fun for a kid to do that. You get all the ingredients, they get to put them on their rice paper, you soak the rice paper, it gets more bendable, they roll it up, they dip it in the sauce that they want. Everyone can have their own dipping sauce. You can decide how much of each thing you're going to be putting in your spring roll, and you can have fun with it, actually. So you can certainly eat the foods that are yours to eat, because it's your body that you're taking care of there, and your brain and your digestion and your resilience. Do not eat what you know wears you down. So don't eat their leftovers if you know it's going to feel crappy to you the next day. And if it's tempting to eat those leftovers, we want to ask ourselves right there, what are my emotions? What's going on with me right now? What is my reflex to eat those leftovers? And am I not worthy of more than leftovers off of the plate of the child or the spouse? Sometimes it's fun, something just is there. It's like a fun moment. But if it's one of those habitual things that you've been doing, I want you to be worthy of more than leftovers. Okay. It's getting darker again. Sorry about that. The wind is coming in too. So the cool sound of the rain. I know you can't hear the rain because I've got my AirPods on, but it's really coming down. Wow. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, if it's your upstream person, you still eat what you eat, and you make something really simple and easy for them to digest, because digestion in later life like that is hard. It's not as easy to digest, and you want to tend to, just like so lovingly, to the best of your ability to be loving, but don't forego the foods that you know you need to eat for your own mental health, physical health, digestive health, and so on. There's 2 more questions here. Thank you also for your acknowledgements in the chat. I do appreciate that. Yeah, like where do the hours in the day go? Oh yeah, yeah, I know. Where do the hours in the day go? Right. This is one reason that we say get up early in the morning. We say wake up at sunrise in Ayurveda. Waking with sunrise makes sense for your hormones and your cortisol cycle, and it also gives you the auspicious time of day for having your yoga practice or your meditation practice. And then you won't have missed it. You'll have had the practice, you'll have been on your mat, so you can't later in the day have the regret of not getting on your mat. And it's not just that you got on your mat, it's that you also moved your body, your physiology. You did the cleansing of the body in the morning after sleeping. You've moved the lymph, you've moved the circulation, you've stretched the myofascial system, you've done the things that you need to do to feel better. And then you've meditated so that your mind is more clear for the day. And as you're doing that, then that carries with you through the day. Of course, sometimes you're going to have a total collapse. You're going to do that in the morning, you're going to feel amazing. And the next thing that happens feels like it collapses the whole thing. And that would be a sign that your resilience actually isn't astounding right now, may not be that robust. And a sign also that that thing, whatever it was that collapsed you, it kind of pierced through the vitality and joy you got from your practice because it could touch something inside, like a pain point, a part of your pain body that got activated there. It means that the outside world was a catalyst for something that you're still carrying in the inside world, something that we really want to be able to address. It also perhaps could be that that catalyst is a chance for you to use your Jedi Knight skills you're being challenged by the universe to not collapse in the face of whatever that thing is, but to retain your kind of yogic goodness in that moment. And then, and this might seem like, how are you going to fit this in if it feels like your time is not your own? But having 5 or 6 minute timeouts for mindfulness all throughout the day, even a 10-minute restorative yoga pose, it's really capable of recalibrating your relationship to time. It really is. I have to get a throat lozenge, excuse me. I woke up with a sore throat. Must be all the weather changing here in Portland. So having these little miniature mindfulness times, they're really, really helpful for you recalibrating your relationship to time because you get restored. And then you can go back to be of service in the way that you want to be, or you get restored and you realize, oh, I'm really tired. I probably shouldn't push on right now. Or you get restored and you say, oh, I can make a couple of those phone calls. It just felt miserable before I had this timeout, this restoration moment. So we can recalibrate our relationship to time, and then we start making choices about how we use our time. We start becoming more effective and more efficient. We ask for more help. We set clear boundaries. Okay, last question. I hope this throat lozenge is not making a lot of noise on the recording. Here's one of my kitties getting some excitement. Oh my God, it's raining out there. It's really raining. Yes, the birds are doing different things now. Oh, you roll around on the floor like that. Just go for it. Okay, last question. Yeah, it is hard. It's hard, really hard to say goodbye to a parent when you feel like there's so much that's unresolved. And sometimes it's just heartbreaking that you have had a desire for healing and wholeness and compassion and heart. You've had a desire to grow and evolve and really know yourself. And you may be with a parent whose capacity for that was blunted by life. Not that they would never have had the interest, but it may have been blunted by their circumstances, and they may not have been able to open back up to that. The courage to do that may not have been there. And so, yeah, that can feel very painful, that you're saying goodbye to a parent who may never have had any real healing, and therefore, like, the level of intimacy that you could have with them has also been blunted. I don't want you to chew on that, honey. No, it's gonna be all right. And so in those relationships, it can be extremely tender. One thing that I like to imagine is the child they once were, the spunk they might have had. How did that get blunted? And if I see them through that lens, can I respect the sadness that I feel for them is not just the sadness that I'll be missing them, but the sadness that they might have missed parts of themselves. I don't recommend that we have to say this explicitly to this particular parent if they can't take that in, because sometimes it's not the right timing. You know, they're working on the end of their life, and what can they do? But at times, the end of life does bring people to a place where they want to ask the deeper questions, and you could be available to them without anger, without anxiety, without blame, but to help them through that. And this might be a place where you ask for a specific therapist or coach to help you guys. This cat is afraid of what's happening outside. Let's see if I can show you. Oh, she's hiding. So you want to respond to your parent in those situations in the best possible way. And sometimes we haven't had the training for that. It may not come naturally to us because we've also had complex relationships with our parents. So we could seek out a specific coach who helps with like end of life care, end of life relationships. Is it kind of scary? I know the rain sounds so loud. Yeah. It's hitting the chimney in a loud spot. We have a woodpecker in the chimney. It's a metal chimney. The woodpecker is constantly pushing on the metal chimney, and now the rain is on the metal chimney too. So I'm sorry, honey. You feeling scared? Yeah, you can stay right here with me. It's okay. Okay, thank you all for your time and for being here this afternoon. This will also get posted to YouTube. And if you're listening to it on YouTube, click subscribe and give the like that you were supposed to give on YouTube to the video. I look forward to our next conversation together. And this, when it goes to YouTube, I look forward to your comments. So please leave a comment below or a question if you have a question about something that I've said during the discussion. Or if you've got a question for Bindi, that's her name, Bindi. Now she's checking it out again. Oh my God, what's gonna happen next? Where are your siblings and your parents, huh? She's got a sister here and her mom and dad are here. Now she's under the couch. Okay, everyone, please take care of yourselves. I look forward to next time. Thank you for being here. Bye for now.